When a certain game console launched in March of 2017, I wasn't in a good headspace. I was a very sad, very scared, very lost 15-year-old kid. The year before, 2016, was an infamous year as far as games went, particularly Nintendo games. It was desolate. Probably one of the worst years in Nintendo history for game releases. All this, plus plenty of external and spiritual circumstances, made my care and passion for games dwindle to an all-time low. There just wasn't anything to be excited about. So little in my eyes that I actually tuned out to the gaming world completely that year. I didn't watch E3, I didn't hear of that infamous NX, I didn't see a single second of Breath of the Wild before it launched. After caring so much for years before, getting caught up in the Smash Bros. Hype machine and watching every Nintendo Direct I could, I had officially lost the spark I once held. I simply didn't care anymore. And then, one fateful day in February of 2017, a family member approached me. Perhaps seeing how depressed and passionless I was about something I once adored, they offered a proposal. It was my freshman year of high school at the time, and after much floundering in middle school, they wanted to see me improve. If you get all A's on your coming report card, they said, I'll get you a new game console the day it launches. Now, I didn't care nearly as much about video games back then, but I knew a bargain when I heard one. And when the offer came in, I was already well on track to get it done, so I kept it up. And so came the day. March 3rd, 2017. I awoke to find a brand new game console on the kitchen table, along with a copy of the game that I only knew of as what Zelda Wii U became. That game console was the Nintendo Switch. The console that saved my life. 2017. Gradual Return. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of those games that means so much to me, to the point where the task of talking about it in depth is daunting. I kid you not when I say my life as it is now is like this because I played this game. My values as they are now are in small ways what they are because I played this game. Breath of the Wild wasn't just a particularly fun game for me, it was a transformative one. As I get older, that happens less and less, but at the ripe age of 15, plus my aforementioned issues at the time, it's no wonder it did all this. But don't get it twisted. Breath of the Wild didn't change me just because I was vulnerable. I mean, I was, but it still takes a magical game to hit the weak point just right. And to call Breath of the Wild one of the most magical games ever made would be an understatement. I knew what Zelda was at this point, and I loved it, even if I only managed to finish a couple entries, but this utter transformation of the series, the focus on freedom and discovery, the pure awe of looking across the vistas, the shocking moments, the twists and turns, it reminded me, after a long time away, why Zelda, Nintendo, and video games in general were so beloved. The power they wield, the tools at their disposal. Breath of the Wild is a good example of a game that makes you play on its terms, taking it slow, stopping and smelling the roses, or else you won't have a good time. But it's also a great example of what games can do to me, to all of us, if we play by those terms, and let them work their magic. Even as someone completely separated from the gaming world at the time, I knew how special this game was, and it impacted me in massive ways. Link is who I aspire to be, like on a spiritual level. The kind of person who's carefree enough to goof off and slide down a mountain cliff on a shield, but also brave enough to tackle true calamity. It also showed me how valuable it can be, both in games and in normal life, to stop, take a breath, and just take everything in. The biggest way it impacted me, though, was just the fact that it reignited my love for video games, and thus began a gradual return to the world I had detached from. I started watching gaming content again, this time with much less Minecraft involved. I started exploring other games I missed out on, or never got a chance to try. And of course, I got back into the news and discussion and speculation side of it all. Again, though, all of this was pretty gradual. I didn't tune into the Nintendo Direct presentations in April or September of that year, for instance. And E3 was less of a hype and amazing moment for me, and more of a thing I watched and went, cool, that Mario game looks pretty neat. I was invested, but I hadn't given my heart back to this medium yet. I was impacted, but I guess something inside me knew that that kind of impact was an outlier, and I didn't want to get my hopes up for more. But then came the second life-altering game in Nintendo's arsenal. Because when Christmas rolled around, I received a little game called Super Mario Odyssey. Breath of the Wild was the perfect game to have after so much time away. It pulled out all the graphical and gameplay stops and crafted an adventure that felt deeply personal. And that's exactly what I needed at the time. Odyssey was likewise the perfect game to have while slowly redigging the well of passion, because it sped the process up to an immeasurable degree. Super Mario Odyssey wasn't a transformational game like Zelda was, but it was a catalyst for the slow burn Zelda ignited. I hadn't played a big new 3D Mario game since Galaxy 2. Needless to say, this game was just so refreshing. Super Mario Odyssey is just the best Mario game. Not the best 3D Mario game, not the best on Switch, not the best in years. No, it's just flat out the best Mario game. To start, it's just amazing to control. Mario is and will always be the absolute best in this department, of course, but Odyssey takes the term tight control to a whole other level. Just traversing these stages, not even taking in their sights or finding their moons, just moving in these stages feels so good. The movement speed, animations, responsiveness, they're all marvels of Mario game design. Plus, the sheer amount of moves and options you can use is staggering. There's roll, which you can power up and string into a long jump, hat twirl, dive, ground pound jump. All these things are cool and great on their own for sure, but put together? Holy shit. So yeah, Odyssey is easily my favorite Mario game just to move around in. But it helps that the places you get to explore in this game are so well designed, so big in scope, and so unabashedly whimsical. I mean, we start in Hat Kingdom, which feels right out of Nightmare Before Christmas. Then there's Beachside Kingdom, which likens its beach water to bubbling champagne. Wooded Kingdom, which fuses futuristic and wilderness elements. Ruin Kingdom, where you slay a giant realistic dragon. And Luncheon Kingdom, which is just utter nonsense. And then, of course, one of the best levels in Mario history, Metro Kingdom. New Donk City is literally pure Mario magic, distilled into a level. It's nonsensical and silly, yet feels so lived in. It's a platforming level first and foremost, but it never sacrifices that hustle and bustle of a big city. Not to mention, it's home to one of the coolest sequences in any video game. There are a few common complaints with this game, and I can understand them. The sheer number and frequency of moons can be tiresome. The post-game is simply not worth it, and in general, it doesn't feel as much like a real adventure compared to other 3D Mario games. But when all is said and done, no other Mario game puts such a consistent, wide, and joyful smile on my face as I play, like Odyssey does. It's one of the greatest games Nintendo has ever crafted, if you ask me. Playing Super Mario Odyssey at this point in life was like eating a filet mignon after a year-long fast. It was hearty, filling, but most of all, a reminder that food is delicious. Or, to drop the metaphor, that games are fun. And with that experience closing out the year for me, 2017 marked a turn in my life that is, to this day, very clearly the start of where my life is right now. It's been nearly 8 years, and it feels weird to say that considering how young I was, but I still think it's true. 2017 was the beginning of my growing up. And ironically, my inner child was happier than ever too. But it was about to get even happier. "2018. A smashing time." In 2013 and 14, I was obsessed with the pre-release hype of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. I listened to discussion after speculation, after leak, after top 10, about what characters could possibly be added. I logged on to Miiverse every morning to see the daily game update, watched every Nintendo Direct I could, and watched hours and hours of E3 coverage. I was head over heels in love. And it, of course, continued past those games' releases with DLC. But eventually, it finished. Corrin and Bayonetta released, and with them, Smash 4's story ended. This was one of many factors that led to my step away. The first year of Switch reminded me that I love video games, not just Smash. Luckily, I wouldn't have to go much longer without Smash being back in the picture to drive that passion into warp speed. March 8th, 2018. I'm in my room. There's company over, so I'm trying to be quiet, watching a Nintendo Direct. This is the first one I've watched live since 2015, and the news was actually intriguing me since I'd returned the previous year. But whatever was in that Direct besides the ending is genuinely hard to remember for me because that final showing was one that, no joke, changed my life forever. At the time, it was simply called Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo Switch, but that's all I needed. I screamed, covered my mouth with a pillow, and I'm pretty sure that didn't help. I genuinely didn't care about the details. I just wanted Smash back in my life. Not just the gameplay, but the lifestyle, the discussions, reactions, speculations, leaks, everything. I had already learned to take the good with the bad there, and I was ready for the roller coaster. And oh boy, did I get a roller coaster. And it ended up being 4 years long, too. I kid you not when I say that Smash being a topic of discussion on the internet for that long was literally life-sustaining. But for now, let's focus on the year at hand. The months following the initial reveal were filled with many theories and arguments and speculations. Was this a port of the Wii U game? A brand new game? Wait, the text at the bottom of the trailer said original game HAL Labs. Does that mean it's a reboot of the series that goes back to its roots? Guys, I think the silhouette is Bowser, and this silhouette's Marth, and this one's Jimmy Neutron. It was quite funny looking back, but I was just as enveloped in it as anyone else. This is what Smash hype does to a man. It changes your brain chemistry, I swear. I was in the camp that it was probably in the middle. A game that used a lot of Smash 4's assets, but had a lot of new aspects and characters and mechanics all the same. But we didn't have to wait that long to find out, because everyone pretty much knew from March onward that we would see this game back in action in June. E3 2018 was coming, and Nintendo is no stranger to making Smash a big event at the Expo. And good gracious, did they. It started with Nintendo's E3 Direct, and I remember this one well. School was out in just a few days, and I should have been studying for exams, but it's Smash, man. No way I'm skipping out on that. And so, after 20 minutes of normal game trailers, it started. Masahiro Sakurai appears, and instantly I'm taken back to the Smash 4 days. And then a certain trailer played. Listen, I know this trailer is all gameplay with no fancy CG animation or big splash reveals, but even without all those bells and whistles we've come to expect, this is my favorite Smash trailer. The way it gently draws you in with obvious starters, keeps your attention with early interesting showings like Ice Climbers and Inkling, slowly ramps up the new sights and interesting changes to old characters, shows you Cloud to really pique your surprise, and then drops the bomb with Snake. And just in case you thought everyone is here was just a marketing tagline like I did, they show Pichu in the very next frame. The one character that nobody in a million years thought would make it back. This moment showed everyone what they meant, and what they meant was what they said. Everyone is here. From there, everything else in this trailer, and the Direct for that matter, was pure frosting. It was nice having such a long and dedicated segment to Smash, and to have it end with Ridley, a character so requested and begged for so long, it felt really good. Even if I personally wasn't a Metroid fan. Yet. And then, finally, the release date. December 7th. The next 5 months would be grueling, but exciting all the same. But that wasn't even the end. Smash had so much more to come at this E3, and I obsessed over all of it. Every morsel of gameplay, every Treehouse presentation, every interview, every trailer analysis, and of course that invitational tournament they held as well. Nintendo knew that their main cash cow was Smash in this E3, and they knew it well. I could go over every little announcement and direct and rumor and leak in detail for 2018. I really could, but we'd be here way too long, and that's also not really the point of this piece. Maybe we can make a separate thing on Smash hype and what makes it special, but for now, let's remember that other games did exist in 2018. It was a slow year outside of Smash, to be sure. A lot of Nintendo's first-party lineup this year was made up of Wii U games, which made sense, but they were definitely leaned on a bit too hard. Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition is a great little game. Well, I said little, but it's actually ridiculously massive. Finishing the story probably only gets you through like 10% of everything this game has to offer. Paradoxically though, gameplay-wise, you really can't experience all it has to offer in, say, 10 stages or so. Unfortunately, it just gets old really fast. The Warriors formula is great, and I will personally advocate for a Kid Icarus Warriors game until the day I die, but as one of Tecmo's earlier attempts at transforming a series into a Warriors game, it comes across less like a blend of these two franchises and more like a Zelda skin on top of a pre-existing Dynasty Warriors game. Don't get me wrong, it's fun, not to mention the soundtrack, character design, and some of these deep-cut references are top tier. As a Zelda fan, this game makes me really happy. I'm really glad it exists, but I don't want to ever play it again. There was also Mario Tennis Aces. This game is probably the best Mario sports game on Switch, but that's not really saying all too much either, so I don't know. I do remember this game being the source of ire for more than a few folks. Not that it was a bad game, just lacking in content. After a ludicrous 2017 full of massive games, this game, along with Kirby Star Allies having a rather disappointing scope, was really drawing snap back to reality for a lot of people. I think this is pretty handily the best Mario Tennis game in terms of gameplay, but purely because it has better single player, I prefer Power Tennis on GameCube, even still. Super Mario Party was received okay when it first came out, but with the benefit of hindsight and with two much better games in the series now on Switch, I think it's fair to call it like it is. I really don't like this game. Listen, I love the dice gimmick in this game, or at least the concept behind it. Mario Party is like Mario Kart in that the character you pick amounts to very little. Mario Kart fixed this in Double Dash by giving characters unique items. Super Mario Party feels like it saw that and tried to replicate it, but in a way that doesn't feel nearly as special. Not to mention it's really unbalanced. I personally think the character-specific things should have been items or maybe passive abilities. What if every character had their own trap tile that did a different thing? Or what if Wario always got 10% more coins, or Yoshi always added 2 to his dice roll, as 2 examples? It would no doubt still be unbalanced, but at least it'd be a lot more fun, and it showed the character's personality off way better too. And then, the boards. These boards are bare bones and way too small. The minigames are probably the best part of this package, and they all require one Joy-Con. You can't use 2, no Pro Controller, no handheld mode. There are a bunch of other modes in here too that are like, okay, but why? Why are these even here? To their credit, they patched in online play later on, making the normal mode playable online instead of limiting it to the Mario-thon is what I think it was called. And that was neat. But it would have been neater if it had a save feature and didn't constantly disconnect. Yeah, just go play Superstars or Jamboree. You'll have more fun, I promise. Now let's touch on a couple third-party games. Mega Man 11 was quite fun. It's nothing mind-blowing, but the classic series games I played, which is admittedly not many, it's 100% the most fun to control, with the most casual, friendly options. I particularly like the ability to buy E-Tanks, lives, and upgrades in a shop. Octopath Traveler was interesting. I'm a huge fan of the HD 2D style, but the story and characters of this game just didn't quite grab me like I wanted. The demo was enough for me, so I just put it down. Overall, I'd say 2018 was not the best year for Switch. The general reaction to E3 2018 was, we like Smash, but where are the rest of the games? And I think that kind of encapsulates this whole year, to be honest with you. But when Smash did finally come out, man, did it pack a punch. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a game that feels fake. I sometimes wonder if a game like it will ever happen again. It's just so impressive. There's so much about Smash that we take for granted. The valiant but bitter attempts at other platform fighter games in the years since its release really make me appreciate what it does right all the more. everything about these characters, voices, animations, movesets, movement, feels authentic to them. I think it says a lot about how great this series is at capturing a character's feel when the exceptions to these things that I'm talking about are what get people most worked up. And yeah, there are a few exceptions, and plenty of flawed characters. Sonic is egregious, Rob is a war crime, Steve needed a lot more playtesting. You get it. And double yeah, there are plenty of flaws about Ultimate 2. The adventure mode was fun for a while, but became a slog by the end. There's a serious lack of meaningful single player besides the adventure mode. The online sucks. And while characters are in general well represented, entire series are not. And not by a long shot. The disparity in stages and music in particular is so frustrating. But despite all that, this game remains one of my favorites of all time. It's gonna sound fanboyish, but as someone who's grown up with Nintendo all his life, the amount of joy I get from this video game is incomparable. As crossovers become more and more corporate and pointless, something about Smash all these years later feels the same as it always has. Just a Nintendo fan playing with his toys, and I'm not sure if I'll ever get enough. The amount of love and care that's so clearly poured into this series is always so evident to me, to the point where it kind of hurts when each game's biggest mistakes become their legacies. Brawl is forevermore known as the tripping game. Smash 4 is the Bayonetta game. These mistakes were bad and indefensible, even for what was supposed to be a party game, but to watch all that clear passion get boiled down to such harsh parodies does make me a little sad. And I hope Ultimate doesn't meet the same fate, even with its many flaws in the competitive space. Because at the end of the day, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a dream come true video game. A crossover with meaning, impact, and passion in both its creators and its player base, in a day and age where love for such crossovers is increasingly rare. It's a developmental, design, animation, and for legal nerds out there, negotiation masterclass. And the moments of joy it brought me, both while playing it and while watching its amazing reveals, will forever be my favorites in video game history. Masahiro Sakurai, thank you. I know you made a product that I bought, and maybe thanking you for that is a little bit corny, but I'm doing it anyway because it's clear to me, and hopefully to everyone else, that Smash is more than a product to you. It's more than a fighting game, more than just another project. It's an event, a celebration, a love letter to the medium of video games. Nobody asked you to go this hard, but you always do, and it makes this $60 product one of the most joyful ones I've ever had the pleasure of purchasing. Whatever comes next for Smash, and God only knows what that is, I'll never forget what Ultimate did for me, and how it impacted my love of games. So thank you for everything. (2019) Back in business. With a great introductory year and a year of Smash hype now out of the way, it was time for the Switch to settle into its true identity. Simply a console with a shitload of video games. I mean, there were plenty of games in the first 2 years to be sure, but to me, 2019 marked the first year where it was legitimately overwhelming to keep up with. On top of all the games, There were more Smash characters, the first year of Nintendo Switch Online updates, and, in my opinion, the first Nintendo Directs that felt like they had really hit their stride. Maybe it's because it was the year before a certain world-altering event, but I look back on 2019 particularly fondly. It felt like there was always something to be excited about, and the pacing of games and announcements was really stellar. However, going into this year, we actually didn't really have a good idea of what was to come for the Switch, which made this year's first Direct in February, straight from the opening seconds, feel so good, as they announced a sequel to one of the Wii U's greatest innovations. Super Mario Maker 1 was a rare Wii U game that felt like it had real impact. It was the time where you could actually be kind of a little bit proud to be a Wii U owner. It was an inspired idea, a really cool game. It lent itself to internet content pretty well too. So in my head, when the inevitable Switch version of Mario Maker released, Mario Maker 2 in this instance, surely it would make massive waves, no? How could it not? Well, for one, while they added plenty of new options and features, they actively took away from the creative potential of the first game by not including amiibo costumes. My best guess for the reason why is that they felt the need to include one for every figure again, but by 2019 the library of them was way too big. I hope that's not it, because that would be really stupid, but what's done is done, I guess. Point is, one of the most popular genres of Mario Maker levels was just kinda gutted instantly. The second biggest problem with Mario Maker 2 isn't even with the game itself, really. It's just the fact that it's on a console with only one screen. The original Mario Maker had this great flow to creating levels. You could build on the gamepad screen, observe it with full size and context on the TV, and then press one button to instantly start testing. Mario Maker 2 tries to keep the flow snappy, but it's just not as intuitive on only one screen. Building means you can't see anything else. The menus have to cover the level, and as a result, you kind of have to know what you're looking for, navigate these wheel menus, which simply aren't as intuitive as the Wii U's touch controls, and then place the thing where you want it. It might seem like a nitpick, but it really does make the whole creative process a whole lot worse. Before, you could open the menu, see everything you could possibly place on one screen, and your entire level on a different screen. The ideas flowed so much more naturally when you could picture your level evolving in real time like that. Plus, the process of trial and error was so much more convenient on Wii U. I understand that the Switch had to make these sacrifices, lest it be a game that required a peripheral or companion app or something, and that would hinder accessibility a ton. But that doesn't mean the problems aren't there, and while they certainly weren't big enough to keep the game from being a decent enough success, especially after the World Maker update came out, I still feel like I didn't get a lot of truly memorable creative experiences out of this game, like I did the first. And that really is a shame. But that's okay, because in the same Direct, Nintendo announced one of my favorite games of all time. Tetris 99 is the video game version of crack cocaine. I'm convinced they somehow managed to manifest the feeling of it into digital form. Who knew that all you really needed to make Tetris absolutely incredible was add 98 other people? I'm joking. Tetris by itself is incredible, but the premise alone sells you on this game for a reason. It's genius. The moment you see the screen, you may not understand it fully, but you at least see the basic idea and appreciate the chaos. I have won one Tetris 99 game in my life, and it was when the player base was likely much worse than they are now. Still, the tension I felt was palpable, and the pride I still feel is unreasonable. Look man, it's Tetris. It was already awesome, and maybe saying specifically Tetris 99 is one of my favorite games of all time is disingenuous, since I don't even have the paid content. But come on, it's Tetris, but more intense and rewarding than it already was. There's not much else to even say besides what we already know, which is that this game rules. Covering a few smaller games, Boxboy Bless Box Girl is a pretty neat little release, but man, does it wear out its welcome after a while. Maybe I didn't help by not moving on in the game until I had every medal for a given stage, but even still, I was done with this game by World 9, stretched myself to World 10, thinking I was nearing the end, and then turned the game off instantly when they revealed 4 more worlds beyond that. On to Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020, which was a video game. I gotta be honest, I think it says a lot when the most interesting thing about this video game is that the Olympics it represents didn't happen until 2021. Because the actual game is so bog standard, it hurts. There's a story mode that I cannot imagine having the patience to play through all the way. A litany of events that boil down to mashing buttons, and in general, a really obvious feeling of cheapness. No wonder the Olympic Association killed this series. I grew up with the Wii entries, and those aren't perfect by any means, but at least they felt a little inspired. This one truly feels like a contractual obligation. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 felt that way too, but not in the same way. It may feel like this game's existence is purely a product of corporate contracts, but at least you can tell the makers of it cared about the properties and characters they were using. I made the mistake of playing every level I played alone. No one else helping me out, and I absolutely refused to use those dumb gems or upgrade my characters at all. I knew the entire time that I was making the experience worse for myself, but something in me refused to put in so much effort for a game that boiled down to spamming buttons. I like Marvel a lot. I'm not a super fan or anything, I fell off after Endgame, but I still like the characters. Even so, the novelty of playing as superheroes and killing dozens of bad guys at a time is just something that's been done to death, and I can't really say this game offers anything unique at all, besides a pretty wide cast. It's cool Nintendo published it though. That'll be a neat little bit of trivia for a while to come. While we're procrastinating my 3 big games of 2019, let's also talk a little about E3 2019. I mentioned earlier that 2019 was the first year that felt like Directs really hit their stride, and I think E3 was proof. This Direct was just so snappy. Quick, to the point when needed, but not afraid to dive deep into certain games either. And while it's funny to look back on some of these trailers with the benefit of hindsight and chuckle, a lot of what was announced here was just really, really cool. I mean, if you're a Smash fan, they had you covered with 2 bombshell character drops. Hero from Dragon Quest, a huge get for Japanese folks, and Banjo-Kazooie, a long-requested character that many had given up hope on after Microsoft acquired the rights. But there was also Animal Crossing, Breath of the Wild 2, updates on Luigi's Mansion, Link's Awakening, Fire Emblem, Mario Maker. Can you see why I said 2019 felt overwhelming? But E3 2019 did also spark a bit of controversy. Yep, folks, it's time. Let's talk about Pokemon Sword and Shield. I would like to start by saying up front that these are indeed my least favorite Pokemon games. But not for the reasons you probably think. I don't care all that much about graphics, and I think the Pokedex cut thing was inevitable. No, the reason I found Sword and Shield so underwhelming was pretty simple. It didn't feel like a real adventure. Pokemon has always been good at making your journey feel real. Not necessarily immersive or realistic, but grounded in the Pokemon world, with a lot of different sites and locations to experience. There are always stinkers, sure, but there are also a lot of high points, and I always leave Pokemon experiences remembering those most of all. Castelia City will never leave my brain. Neither will Route 18 from Pokemon X and Y, National Park and Mount Silver from Gold and Silver, Zootopolis City, Pony Canyon, the Sinnoh Lakes, Distortion World. There are always locations and twists on your journey that stick with you and make the memories of this game feel epic, even if the journey on the whole was maybe too easy or frustrating or traumatic. But the Galar region just doesn't have any of that. It's by far Pokemon's most boring region. This is, I recognize, partly on purpose. The focus of Sword and Shield is indeed the battling, which has been made into Galar's biggest cultural touchstone. Dynamaxing as a mechanic facilitates bigger battlefields, or stadiums, and the UK culture the game emulates draws parallels between Pokemon battling and football. And to be fair, the sacrifices made to the world's sense of exploration and adventure are traded off for feelings behind each battle being unprecedentedly epic. That, plus the great battle music of Sword and Shield, contributed to by Toby Fox, makes for some of the most memorable moments in battle that the series has ever seen. But then, as soon as you're out of battle, the fun dissipates. There's truly nothing fun about the trek between towns and cities besides the universal fun of seeing what new Pokemon you've unlocked access to, but that exists in every Pokemon game. Yeah, Pokemon being on the overworld does bring with it advantages, random Pokemon being gone, the world feeling a bit more lived in, and opportunities for unique Pokemon behavior to be on display, which adds to the feeling of Pokemon being truly wild creatures. But none of this offsets the frustrating lack of interesting places to go or decisions to make. The cities of Galar are visually appealing, but never in depth enough to feel like real locations. This trend of lackluster towns and cities would be continued in future games, yes, but Sword and Shield's purely linear approach means the journey is just as bland as the destination, and that makes the entire experience feel utterly underwhelming. I do love a lot about these games, though, don't get me wrong. The main journey may feel like a bit of a slog, but that doesn't mean I don't appreciate a lot of what they were trying to do. For one, I really love James Turner's art direction here. It's the perfect intersection between that classic Pokemon art style and the more realistic design sense that they brought in when they went 3D. To be honest, I much prefer this style to Scarlet and Violet, and with the upcoming ZA looking like it's adopting Scarlet and Violet's style, Sword and Shield stands now as my favorite looking Pokemon game on Switch. I'm serious. There's weak spots, sure. It's Pokemon, of course there are. The wild area in particular just isn't visually up to par. But again, the towns and cities look quite nice, and in battle, this game feels more than ever like two living, breathing creatures in a fight. At least, as far as the classic turn-based formula allows. The Pokemon designs are also really nice. There's not a ton of breathtaking instant classics necessarily, but in general, I found that I appreciated a lot of the references and gimmicks present in this stacks of newbies. Stonjarner is hilarious, Ice-Q is amazing, Surfetched is badass, and I really love Galarian Ponyta. The starters are all pretty cool, and three in particular that I adore are Phalanx, Berserker, and Orbeetle. I also think the DLC is one of this game's brighter spots. The fact both DLC packs are just two unique wild areas really makes the vision Game Freak had for the original one come a bit more to life. These feel like actual realizations of what the wild area in the base game tried to accomplish. And then, those legendary raids are so fun! As a huge fan of Battle Factory from Diamond and Pearl, these scratch that same itch with the added benefit of catching legends at the end. And upped shiny odds, of course. Speaking of legendaries, though, those regional forms of Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres all rule. Galarian Moltres has become an all-time favorite. All in all, Galar as a concept should be a region I look back on in awe. A British region full of huge, awe-inspiring stadiums and a colorful cast of new characters and Pokemon should have been legendary and unforgettable. But it didn't come close to sticking the landing. In plot, in scope, in route design, in town design, basically in anything that contributes to the more adventurous aspects of the series. And that was really disappointing. But, where one long-standing RPG had a downturn this year, another released the definitive edition of what was possibly its best ever entry on Switch. And, let me check my notes. Oh yeah, we have another life-changing one here, people. Dragon Quest XI is tradition polished to perfection. It's so utterly faithful to its OG gameplay style that some may assume it's to a fault, but unlike Pokemon, which ended up being bogged down by its refusal to adapt, the developers of Dragon Quest clearly understand what parts of their traditions and tropes are still valuable for a modern game, and they lean into those most of all. This is why I called it tradition polished to perfection. It's so refined, without ever tossing aside or disrespecting those time-honored things that made the series successful in the first place. There's such a sense of love and respect for all the history that brought the series here, which makes the diversions from what's expected come across as remarkably well considered. And when I say diversions, I'm not just talking about differences in gameplay or environments, but also in story. Dragon Quest will never blow minds completely when it comes to story. It's still a JRPG, but it knows exactly what you're expecting going in, and many parts of the plot play with those expectations. Again, though, not in a way that feels disrespectful to the player or past games in the series. It's not self-deprecating or self-righteous. Let me give you an example. Spoiler warning, by the way. For much of the game up until this moment that I'm about to talk about, you've been on a journey to defeat the evil dark bad guy by pulling a sword which only you, the chosen one, can obtain. There's other stuff in the way, but the overarching plot never pushes any boundaries beyond that. It really is just an Excalibur story. But when you get to the forest which holds that blade, doesn't it all feel final, or extraordinary, or remotely special? It's just another environment with monsters you've fought a ton before, and the journey to the world tree that follows isn't some gorgeous climactic spectacle, it's a pretty lame generic cutscene. All this makes the lead up to that moment, when you're finally about to obtain the blade, feel so ominous. Nothing is directly off, but if you've ever played an Excalibur game before, you know these moments usually represent the beginning of the end. The moment the hero becomes their full, true self and becomes the most ready to defeat the evil. And this just felt regular. Too regular. Why? Because that weapon wasn't the source of hope you thought it was. In fact, in one dreadful moment of defeat, the hero is nearly killed. The blade is stolen and malformed to darkness, and the world tree is destroyed. The screen fades black, and the words, Act 2, appear. Holy shit! Sure, none of this is like jaw-dropping betrayal in a movie. It's not some amazing mind-blowing twist from a cinematic masterpiece, but for a JRPG that thrives off tradition, this moment is jaw-dropping. It knew what you were expecting, and it not only threw a curveball, it used its penchant for tradition to disguise the curveball. And my god, for me, that throw hit its mark. It then proceeds to use this break from the expected to get across a pretty poignant theme. It's not a chosen hero, and especially not any sort of weapon, light-bathed or not, that gives the world hope. What gives the world hope is simply that there are heroes, legendarily chosen or not, who keep fighting, no matter the situation. I could go on. I could gush for a while about all the ways this story impacted me, but there's so much to get to and not enough space to talk about it. Just know this. Dragon Quest XI's story is cozy, heartwarming, heart-wrenching, free-flowing, well-presented, and perfectly paced. It taught me about real hope in a world that's starting to look more and more like Erdrea did when the world tree was chopped down. It has things to say about greed, friendship, family, politics, brotherhood, and death. Not all of it will make you think much. Some of it's pretty simple. In fact, most of it is. But what I love most about Dragon Quest is that it does not care. Sometimes the answers we overthink about and spend years looking for are way simpler than we expect. A game like Dragon Quest isn't thought-provoking by being particularly deep or personal, but by reminding you of life's simple truths. And might I say, since it took several years to finally beat this game, including throughout 2020 and 2021, I needed a good reminder of life's simple truths at that time. If I didn't love Chrono Trigger with everything in me, this would be my favorite RPG. It does pretty much everything right. The cast is unforgettable, and all of them are so lovable. It's packed to the absolute brim with stuff to do, and man, is this game pretty. I cannot recommend it enough. Oh, and the gameplay and battle system are good too, I guess. Finishing off our 2019 discussion is Luigi's Mansion 3. If you ask me, one of the most underrated games on the Switch. This game is just breathtaking, man. It toes the line perfectly between atmospheric and, Mario-y, I guess. Next Level Games became one of my favorite studios with this game because of the way they animate and characterize everything, even things that aren't actually characters. It's not often that a game taking place in a haunted mansion like this makes me feel so utterly happy to explore. It's a linear game through and through, and that may bother some folks who prefer the style of the first game, but man, when every place you go is so well realized and every task that's asked of you is so engaging, who cares about what gets you from place to place? Luigi's Mansion 3 is my favorite Switch game that I barely have anything to say about. Not because it's not worthy of praise, but it's just a little simple in its approach. It's definitely the most like a traditional video game of my top Switch games. Nothing I can say beyond the basics would mean much, so just go play it. You can wait till October if you feel like it, though. As I keep saying, 2019 was an overwhelming year for the Switch. But being fully honest, I personally was focused mostly on Smash most of the time. I played all the games I mentioned at some point in the Switch's life, I'm not lying to you, but those final 3 I mentioned, for instance, were Christmas gifts. I was still a teenager, you gotta remember. 2019 wasn't a major step in my life, nor in my video game journey, but it certainly had a few games that helped in both causes later down the line. Not to mention a big focus on Smash, which, by the way, was the sole reason I even played Dragon Quest. I loved 2019. In the moment, it was so much fun. It's just, looking back, it was a lot less playing real video games and more an obsession over Smash announcements and Nintendo Directs and all that jazz. That's fine, but it adds little to the personal side of this narrative. Unfortunately, next year would add way too much. "2020, The Cliff. I will never forget 2020. I really want to, but it's just impossible. It was the year everything truly felt like it stood completely still. And yet, also, like I was careening down a steep slope to who the hell knows where. I know we all went through it, so I won't bore you with the details of my specific experience, but speaking purely about my emotional and mental well-being, I fell off a cliff. I was a nervous wreck, scared about every little thing, traumatized by my entire life being rug pulled under me like it was. And since I was a senior in high school, there was no hope of a return to normalcy that I once knew either. It all just vanished without a trace. Effectively, my life pushed a reset button. I say I'll never forget 2020, but the worst part is that I don't remember the specifics of any of those days. They blur together so much that it just becomes a frozen state in my life, where I was so far from anything resembling okay. And of course, it didn't help that these same world events either halted or negatively impacted my biggest interests as well, and that includes video games. Nintendo's 2020 wasn't as bad as people make it out to be on paper, but living through it was quite awful all the same. Not that any of us blamed them, really. It was made worse for me personally that I was never really an Animal Crossing guy. I felt happy for the folks who needed it at the time, but it never really appealed to me personally, and I wouldn't have had any friends to visit anyway. For me, 2020 consisted of playing through games like Dragon Quest and Pokemon Shield, and experimenting with non-Nintendo platforms like Steam with my newfound laptop. It couldn't run much, but it was good enough to play stuff like Sonic Generations, Final Fantasy VII, and Rayman Legends. All in all, there was one single new Switch game I played the week it came out in 2020, and that was Clubhouse Games' 51 Worldwide Classics. And the game is pretty good. It's a little bit overloved by the more ironic Nintendo folks, but at its core, it's a pretty quality game. It's not the snappiest or most in-depth way to play these classic board games, but it is one of the most charming. I distinctly remember an incident where my sister, friend, and I played Sorry, or whatever the game calls it, I forget, and the game lasted way too long. Another where we struggled to understand Hounds and Hare, and a very great one where we played a rousing game of President, and things got loud. That one's probably my favorite in the package, but the classic games aren't half bad either. Chess and checkers are a really good time. Mancala is for some reason one of the best looking games in the package. Those marbles are pretty. Backgammon is never a bad time, and the toy sports ones are surprisingly fun as well. 51 games won't blow any minds or anything, and 2020 was probably not the right year for it to release. But if you have company over regularly, or you just want a quick way to play stuff like President or Crazy 8s on the go, pick it up, it's really good. But yeah, I think this should stress to you how dire the straits were at this point. And to make it worse, Nintendo Directs took a break this year too, being replaced with partner showcases, which were clearly just there to please their publishing partners, and Twitter info dumps. To be fair, through these we did get some cool stuff. Ori and the Will of the Wisps came to Switch, which I never played, but the first game is incredible. Paper Mario the Origami King, which I just never got around to, and Pikmin 3 Deluxe, which, no excuse there, I just need to play that. Finally came Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. And this one, I did eventually play. When they first unveiled this game, I was floored. I enjoyed the original Hyrule Warriors, and of course, Breath of the Wild was by this point an all-time favorite. They pitched the premise as something crazy, too. This game would serve as the prequel to Breath of the Wild, allowing us to witness and take part in the war that set off the original game's events. I started fantasizing all these non-Nintendo-like ideas in my mind about where the story would go. Would this game really dare to kill off the cast at the end? Would this be one of those Rogue One kind of games that ends exactly the way you expect, but still manages to make you feel gutted about it? And then, the game came out. And one of the first talking points was, nope, it's all non-canon. The champions aren't the only ones playable, so are their successors from 100 years in the future. That's right, it's a time travel game. And I'm sorry, I know that should not devalue the game, but in my mind it instantly became so much less appealing. I wasn't about to take a chance on a game that, from my perspective, was now just another Zelda fan game in disguise, just like the original Hyrule Warriors. But then, in the 2023 lead-up to Tears of the Kingdom, I said fine and tried it out. And I have to say, that initial judgment was definitely a little harsh. It still pisses me off that they blew the opportunity to make this one of Zelda's most unique and impactful side games, but the actual game has a lot of heart that I couldn't see back then. This team very clearly has so much adoration for Zelda. The art direction is absolutely spot on, to the point where it kind of feels wrong to be controlling this Link in this chaotic and packed of an environment. Everything, down to the map and UI, is so perfect, and the cutscenes look ripped right out of Breath of the Wild as well. It really helps sell the idea of Calamity being a direct prequel. I will say, the character variety this time around is just a little bit flat. Having the champions as well as their successors be half the character roster makes things feel a little bit samey. And that, plus the typical repetitive gameplay issues that come with Warriors games, made me eventually put it down. Still, a much more worthwhile game than I initially gave it credit for. There was one more game that came out in 2020 that I played a whole lot, but full disclaimer, it wasn't in 2020, just to be clear. It was actually a rather recent escapade. That game was Rune Factory 4 Special. As someone new to the entire concept of farming and cozy games, the amount of streamlined and well-thought-out features and shortcuts here shocked me. I always assumed that games like this were purposefully slow-paced, but actually, they seemingly try their hardest to make things really snappy and accessible. I always thought these games had a ton of real-life waiting, but it turns out, if you ever run out of work for a day in-game, you can just go to bed and go next as soon as you want. For a solid couple months, I was on the grind set with this game. I had a system. Every day I'd harvest my crops first thing, sell them, go buy a treat for my crush Forte, and she'd thank me, and then from there I'd go do whatever needed done to improve my skills or finish a dungeon or whatever I was doing. Its 3DS roots are a bit obvious, and it's definitely a little dated, but who cares when the gameplay feels this great and the characters are so likable? Also, the music. It's nothing special, there's no memorable melodies, but it definitely feels like a warm blanket in the best way. My only issue is the story being so episodic and predictable, but that's hardly the reason why most people play these sorts of games from what I'm told, and likewise, I certainly didn't care that much. I dropped this game before I could marry Forte, so I'd like to get back to it sometime. I came in expecting to bounce right off, and instead found a game that gave me some really good memories looking back. So, at least the Switch in 2020 wasn't a complete crapshoot. 2020 felt like a pause button. Like the momentum the Switch had built was put on pause for a while we all waited for things to get better. I feel like that's a pretty good encapsulation of how pretty much everything felt at that time, actually, including, like, our mental development, just put on pause. And you know something? I'm weirdly kind of nostalgic for it. Not the horrible stuff that happened, obviously. The death and disease and turmoil sucked. But it did also feel like, for a brief moment, we all had a tiny bit more empathy for each other. We are cynical about everything right now, and I understand why we think we have a right to be. Times are hard. But for some reason, in the midst of a worldwide crisis, that cynicism didn't really seem to be the driving force. It was empathy. Listen, I pray nothing like 2020 ever happens again in our lifetimes. It was, of course, catastrophic in a lot of ways. But I think it's interesting how forgiving we all were. How driven we were to stay social and do whatever we could to stay sane. How it somehow never felt completely hopeless. And Nintendo's efforts this year kind of had the same vibe. Just a maladaptive company trying their best to excite their fans. It was quaint, really. They had so little to work with, yet tried so hard to make it feel special. And I think that says a lot. (2021) Rebuilding. 2021 was the most change-filled year of my life, bar none. I moved out of the home I'd lived in my entire life, got a full-time job, and my family was going through some rough stuff, too. I was extremely frustrated by this at first. I barely had time to get over the tiny portion of my childhood I had left getting ripped away from me the way it was, but I eventually saw how much better this life was for me. Sure, I still to this day wish that I could have those last few months of high school back, and I still look back on 2020 as the horrible shit show it was, don't get me wrong. But it's not worth it to lament what never was. Not when you can work to make your current life the best one possible. It was certainly an adjustment, but I got through it. I made it work. Likewise, Nintendo showed us, too, how well they'd been adjusting, only 2 months into the year. They were back, and it was honestly like they never left. I mean, it wasn't a great direct, but it was a direct. It had a bunch of new games that were coming out in the year, and it was full length and fun to discuss. I was in a massive state of flux, still getting over a severe bout with anxiety and panic attacks and adjusting to my new life. But Nintendo being back, like 2020 never happened, knowing we had quote-unquote normal slate of games to come, that was very nice. In another funny twist of fate though, I once again didn't end up playing too many brand new experiences this year. Still focused a bit too hard on Smash's insane hype train. But that was justified. It was the last year of support for Ultimate, and the lead up to that final reveal was something else. Let me tell you, Sora finally being in Smash was one of those moments that reminded me just how magnificent this medium is. How many tears of joy it brings to people. How much love and nostalgia it fosters. It still breaks me up when I think about watching that moment for the first time. It was just so perfect. Fate clicked into place for one brief, magical, perfect moment in this godforsaken world, and it was nothing short of amazing. Speaking of magical moments, things happening in gaming that felt impossible to those who had maybe given up hope, Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread, man, what an amazing thing to happen. If you don't know, in the early 2000s, a Metroid game was reportedly leaked, titled Metroid Dread. It was supposed to be the 5th iteration in Samus's 2D saga, playable on the Nintendo DS. But even after a cameo message in the 3D game, Metroid Prime 3, said, "Project Dread is nearing completion," Metroid Dread just never came to pass. Until E3 2021, when Nintendo revealed not only a new iteration of the 2D Metroid series, but that it was indeed Metroid 5, and it was called Metroid Dread. Metroid, all of a sudden, became a major subject of cultural gaming interest. It was something of a renaissance, after many years of other outings in the genre having surpassed it. But here it was, Metroid Dread, in the flesh. And man, that game is so good. It feels exactly how it should. It controls so incredibly tight. The atmosphere is so on point. The visuals are superb. The flow of the game is rarely stagnant. The difficulty level is just right. I didn't beat Metroid Dread until years after it came out, I'll admit, but I still think it's one of the best games to come out of the Switch generation, and I credit its existence with turning me into a Metroid fan. Dread's reveal was the reason I gave Metroid Zero Mission a shot, and that was the game that truly hooked me on this franchise. Metroid honestly might be one of my all-time favorite Nintendo series now. But another one of the all-time greats had a game this year too. It was a remake, but as someone who only really became a diehard fan after Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword posed an interesting question. Could I go from the most free, open, personalized experiences in Zelda to the most strict, linear, predictable one in the franchise? Well, the answer is yes. I'm going to say something controversial here, but I think Skyward Sword is not just one of the most underrated Zelda games. I think it's one of the most underrated games, period. I said before that Luigi's Mansion 3 was simply a good game. Not many frills, nothing to make it personal or cause any truly interesting conversation, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And I think you could say the exact same for Skyward Sword. This game has so many locales and items and dungeons and moments and characters that I ended up really holding near to my heart. Skyloft is the coziest place Zelda has ever crafted. The beetle item is great. It alone makes this game's dungeons so much more interesting to explore. And that desert with the time stones is one of the coolest ideas in any Nintendo game. Ancient Cistern. Well, I don't want to spoil it, but the twist at the end of Ancient Cistern is so cool. And the characters. This might be my new favorite version of Zelda, to be honest. I love how psychotic she is, while still being graceful like the versions I grew up knowing. And Gearhim is such a cool villain by Zelda standards. Nothing like him exists in other Zelda games. And Groose? Holy shit, Groose is one of the funniest characters in Zelda history, and one of the most relatable characters Zelda has ever managed. That one moment where you're diving into Faron Woods and, well, let's just say Groose appears, still makes me laugh. And as far as the quirks go, I won't deny they exist, but the HD version shores them up so well. The one thing I'd say is that the delay on the sword is a little bit irritating. I'd run into these electrically charged enemies and try to react to their timing or positioning, only for the blasted delay to ruin it. But in general, I never really minded that much. In fact, I thought it was kind of refreshing for the combat to be a little bit more intricate than just rolling or spamming spin attack like in past games. There are a few things that are a little hard to wrap your head around. Bombs, pouch items, parrying, they're a little unintuitive, but I'd much rather take a little bit of learning over having to resort to using motion controls. I play in handheld, if you're wondering why that's a no-go. And then there's Fi. Fi only bothered me a little, if I'm fully honest. She'll be like, go outside, I think something changed. And then you'll go outside and she'll stop you immediately and go, look, this thing changed. But in general, it's not that infuriating. It's basic Zelda companion stuff. I can only think of a few examples where it got truly irritating. Oh, and also, the music of Skyward Sword is above average by Zelda standards, which is to say, way above the actual average of video game music. It is so good. Skyloft, Ballad of the Goddess, the Sky theme, Faron Woods, the Loftwing theme, Gearhim's theme, the Roaming Pumpkin, Fi's theme, and so many more. They're all classics. This is like Ocarina of Time level good soundtrack. Yeah, man, just go play Skyward Sword. It's really good. I don't know what else to say. But speaking of re-releases of Nintendo games that are very, very good, Super Mario 3D World is just so joyous. It's pure fun. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Everything from the visuals to the soundtracks to the mechanics to the power-ups. It might not be super wacky, look, we're elephants now level off-the-wall creativity, but it still screams Nintendo magic. And the updates in this version are so good, too. There's not a single change you could argue makes it worse than the Wii U version. Every single one just makes it more fun to play. It's been said a million times, I'm sure, but it remains true. 3D World may not have been what the Wii U needed, but now that Odyssey exists, 3D World can and should be appreciated for everything great it does, because it's just plain good. Now, they could have just re-released this with those changes and added online and called it a day, but they went more than a few extra miles. On top of this already great Mario game was something unlike anything Mario had ever done before. Bowser's Fury. Man, oh man. Super Mario 3D World is a heck of a game, but taking its guts and making this experience out of them highlights just how versatile the very core of Mario is. In a similar structure to the different kingdoms of Odyssey, Bowser's Fury has a vast open map you can explore, with all sorts of different landmarks and challenges littering the landscape. The differences here, though, are in just how big it is, how power-ups change everything, and of course, Bowser, looming in the center, who awakens and tries to destroy you on occasion. Mario Odyssey's kingdoms were big, of course, but they weren't constructed with all that much platforming skill testing in mind. A lot of it is observance or puzzle solving or using capture correctly. But in contrast, pretty much the entire map of Bowser's Fury is constructed like a bunch of tiny little 3D world levels. It introduces a gimmick, uses it to a new degree of potential, introduces a final twist, and then tests your skill at the very end. It feels so much more deliberate in its design than anything Odyssey has to offer. Odyssey also did away with power-ups, not a first for 3D Mario, but in their stead was a capture system. A brilliant idea that elevated the game's entire design scope in a huge way. Bowser's Fury, being based on 3D World, brought back power-ups. But don't for a second think that that's a downgrade. Giving Mario an inventory of power-ups to use initially came across to me as something that would kind of ruin the whole point of power-ups, but quickly I realized how freeing it was to be able to swap them out whenever I wanted, especially in a game this freeform. It just had so much more comfort to things too. For example, I vastly prefer Cat Mario to pretty much all the other power-ups. I like being able to climb up and take shortcuts, I like scratching enemies, I like to dive in midair. It's just a comfy power-up. And so now, whenever I don't need to be Fire or Boomerang or Tanuki Mario for a specific challenge, I can just swap to Cat, and I'm chillin'. It adds a bit of personal characterization to Mario games, which hasn't really been seen before besides the costumes in Odyssey, if you count that. Finally, and obviously, the star of the show is Bowser. Corrupted with some kind of dark goop that's made him mad with power, this giant sleeps in the center of the map, waiting to be awakened. When he does, either via certain gameplay mechanics or just after a certain amount of time, he will proceed to try his absolute best to kill you. Across the map, there are areas blocked by things like blocks that only Bowser can break, goop which can only be cleared once you beat him, or even brand new challenges, sections you've already beaten that only reveal themselves after you defeat Bowser. It's a really fun time. But where Bowser's Fury really excels is its flow state. The moment-to-moment feel of the experience might seem segmented compared to something like Odyssey, given how much more intentional the challenges are, but in my opinion, it's actually the perfect middle ground. The perfect meeting of Odyssey's open world and constant collection with 3D World's more deliberate and satisfying design. I spent way too long in this game without even realizing it, because the flow of it all was simply unreal. Bowser's Fury is a weird game. It's lumped in with 3D World, and it largely feels like a secondary experience. Its mechanics and innovations feel so unexplored, and yet I remember it all so fondly. I still think Odyssey is the best Mario game, simply for its size and sheer creativity, but if an Odyssey-esque game could adopt the design sense of Bowser's Fury, yeah, that'd be my dream Mario game, I think. Now, my dream Mario Party game is pretty close to how Mario Party Superstars handled things. ND Cube still has plenty of frustrating quirks that they can't seem to shake, but just the fact that they finally took feedback to heart and gave us old boards with the classic gameplay style really says a lot. It has the added bonus of redeeming the much-maligned Mario Party Top 100, a 3DS game that featured 100 of the best Mario Party minigames and little else. Now the vision of Top 100 can truly be fulfilled by having actual boards to play the games on. And they're good boards too! Now, there's only 5, which is weird. ND Cube really does have a weird understanding of what makes a game content rich, but still, they're good, trusted, classic boards. That, plus the aforementioned classic minigames, means you can't really go wrong here. It may not be original, but if Mario Party 9 and 10 were ND Cube's best efforts at originality, then yeah, keep giving us old stuff, please. And finally, for 2021, let's talk once again about Pokemon. I said earlier that Sword and Shield were my least favorite Pokemon games, and I meant it. That statement doesn't have any qualifiers added on, it's just true. But if I were trying my hardest to be truly 100% objective, I'd say that the true worst games in the Pokemon series are Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. These games only exist because Pokemon needed a game for Holiday 2021. That is literally it. They are soulless, ugly, unmemorable cash grabs in pretty much every sense. Even people with the lowest of standards are probably at minimum able to tell you that much. However, it's here where the ugly truth about Pokemon rears its head. And that's the fact that there are millions of humans on Earth who will never not buy Pokemon. And I am one of them. Before you yell at me, let me explain. The way I see it is, Pokemon brings me joy. I don't know why this specific children's franchise does, and does so without fail, but it does. I could choose to be offended that certain bigwigs constantly choose to take advantage of that fact, grow cynical, and eventually let that joy dissipate, or I could give myself this one thing. This one smile-inducing, joyful escape from the unstable world. Does it enable lower standards? Sure. Does that make me directly responsible for the rushed and buggy products Pokemon has churned out? That's up for debate, but outside of the scope of this piece, so I'll just give it to you. Does that make me a bad or selfish person? No. It makes me a human who's attached to a thing he grew up with. To summarize, capitalism sucks, but Pokemon makes my neurons go burr, so leave me alone. I would hardly call BDSP a good experience, but as someone highly nostalgic for Diamond and Pearl, who didn't like Sword and Shield, so didn't have any memorable Pokemon experiences on Switch before BDSP, I liked it, okay? It was fun. I shiny hunted, rematched the Elite Four multiple times, did the Battle Tower, got a bunch of legendaries, roamed the underground. I got pretty sucked in. Maybe I am a nostalgia-blind baby. Maybe I am a creature of habit, whatever. The point of video games is to have fun, and though BDSP's fun was pretty mindless, standard Pokemon fun, it was still fun, so it wasn't a waste. That said, will I ever feel compelled to play this game ever again? No. Almost certainly, no. 2021 was the start of my life rebuilding after the collapse brought on by 2020's events. In a similar manner, it felt like Nintendo was doing the very same. Rebuilding. It wasn't a super glamorous year, but it had so much memorable stuff within it, and more than a few moments I will always cherish. In a strange way, it almost felt like the Switch was new again, busting back onto the scene with memorable, joyful offerings immediately after a year of dismal proportions. And circling back to me, I would certainly say that I felt new again, too. Recovering from trauma and anxiety is not an instant thing, I would later learn, but in the moment, I at least took solace in the fact that I wasn't constantly afraid of every little thing anymore. Adding to the lack of glamour, I would hardly say 2021 was a magical moment where I had an epiphany and everything got better. But it was more of a year of gradual but very real growth. I couldn't see it at the time, but 2021 laid the foundation for a lot of my basic mental and habitual function, even today. And once again, paralleling that to Nintendo, I'd weirdly say the following 3 years felt kind of similar to 2021, at least for me. Maybe that's purely because I've had the same job and routine for the last 4 years, I don't know. My journey this far has been kind of basic, I'll admit. I wouldn't call any of my personal issues that deep, to be fair, but where 2021 was a year we all spent recovering from the year previous, 2022 was, for me and my family, a far more personal kind of hell. "2022. Life goes on. Death awaits all of us. Of course, we all know this, and we're all well aware of how seemingly meaningless it can make our lives. But when it actually strikes, even worse, when it strikes someone inconceivably innocent and young, that hurts. Death and grief are no joke. I was not well versed in either topic up until 2022. I learned a lot about myself and my family this year, but the biggest lesson I learned, the best thing you can do to honor the dead is to let go and let life go on. Hey man, I'm young. I never said I was the wisest guy around. I'm just being honest. And I know that's easier said than done. My personal situation was months long, filled with false hope and pretty tragic. The kind of event that has a way of stopping everything in its tracks. But the hard, frustrating, but hopeful truth is that life does indeed go on. And thankfully, so did video games. In a weird twist of fate, though, it was Pokemon that came out the gate first. And might I say, what a glow up. Pokemon Legends Arceus is the best Pokemon game. There, I said it. Now, you very likely disagree, probably citing one of Gens 3, 4, or 5 and saying those were the peak of this franchise, and I don't disagree with those being the peak of traditional Pokemon games, but this game is anything but traditional. You can say it's just novelty all you want, but Pokemon spending 20 years making very slight incremental changes only to turn around and make this game will always be mind-blowing to me. It's not just the differences in gameplay either, it's the entire way it's presented. It's the setting, the story, the art style, the characters, heck, the menus. It all feels so fresh and well considered, like they really wanted to make this game as immersive to its time period as possible. But let's rewind back to that gameplay, because this right here, this is what Pokemon was always meant to be. It just feels right. The tactile feeling of throwing those balls yourself is unbelievable. And to watch those wild creatures run from, embrace, or attack their new potential trainer is equally amazing. It turns out, While not having to battle or lower health to capture Pokemon does remove a bit of challenge, it makes up for that in pure feel. And they knew this, too. After all, the entire progression system in the Pokédex was seemingly designed around how swift and simple it is to catch hordes of Pokemon at a time. And it feels awesome. The Pokédex being structured like a mini achievement book for any given species is just such a great way to incentivize continued play, and the fact that catching comes so naturally means it feels snappy and not too tedious either. Remember when I said that Bowser's Fury excelled in its flow state? Well, as far as Pokemon goes, you're looking at the king of flow state right here. Seriously, going from place to place on your mounts, tossing out your mons to gather materials as you pass, and catching whatever you see as you go, it's a feeling not a lot of exploratory games, much less Pokemon games, can match. And there's so much more, too. They geniusly made this a prequel to Diamond and Pearl, and as such made all the character designs resemble their future descendants. Even beyond the cool fan service, though, they have you actively play a role in restoring the relationship between people and Pokemon, which you see in full force later on in Diamond and Pearl. It's such a neat touch. All my complaints with this game are minor nitpicks, which for a modern Pokemon game is unheard of. I wish you could throw Pokeballs on all of your mounts and not just the water one, and I think the endgame is a little bit too chatty with its story dialogue. A few specific Pokemon are needlessly annoying to find. I wish there were a few more big story battles besides those final few, but in general, Pokemon Legends Arceus was seriously unforgettable. As a Pokemon fan who'd been dreaming of this exact sort of game for years, who loves Gen 4 with all his heart, who had lost faith in Game Freak after a rough start to the Switch generation, I was so blown away by this game. It's just pure Pokemon magic. It makes me so happy to play even now, even though I've done so much in it already, including a whole second playthrough. Like I said, it's the best Pokemon game. Moving on, let's talk about a few old games which saw Switch re-releases this year, one of which ended up making me a pretty big fan. Klonoa Phantasy Reverie is a joy. The feel of this game is classic Namco surrealism. It's so strange yet cozy, existential yet happy-go-lucky. Klonoa himself is now one of my favorite game characters just from design and voice alone, and the mechanics of Klonoa are equally strange, but nonetheless, really fun. It might not be ultra-tight or in-depth, but not every platformer needs to be. In fact, I kind of miss the age of strange, somewhat janky mechanics being the centerpiece of 2D platformers. Another collection released this year, which was Sonic Origins, a complete collection of Sonic 1, 2, 3, Knuckles, and Sonic CD, and a pretty great overall package. The updated modes and added cutscenes are a very nice touch, and Sonic 2 remains as timeless and amazing as ever. There was also Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. I'm not super well versed in the beat-em-up genre, and I'm not the biggest fan of TMNT, but I have always had a passing love for the Turtles, so I gave it a shot. And dude, Dotemu might be one of the best at this stuff. Style and music weren't for me. It's obviously supposed to invoke a 90s vibe through and through, but as a kid born in the early aughts, that doesn't really do much for me. However, what did do it for me was pretty much everything else. The mechanics, difficulty, structure, extra modes, unlockables, it was all such a fun and breezy time. Breezy. Like a balloon. Balloon. Puffball. Kirby! Okay, I've written like 40 segues now. Leave me alone. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is peak Nintendo. It's one of those games that has you nod and understanding the moment you see it. Yep, that's Nintendo. The effort taken here to transfer Kirby's most important and well-known mechanics into 3D is wild. It feels so seamless. Like, imagine if Mario went straight from Super Mario World to Galaxy. No hiccups with 64 or Sunshine in between. It's that smooth. It feels that natural. On top of this, they made certain every copy ability had true oomph behind it. And that soundtrack is one of the best in Nintendo history. That opening stage, Frost Street, Roar of Dedede, the final boss, Waddle Dee Town, and so many more. It's so joyous, not only to play such a bright and fun-filled Kirby game that finally fulfills the lust in Kirby's fans' hearts for the third dimension, but to have this be the background music? Man, what a game. Kirby isn't the most thought-provoking game, and it never has been, but my god, does it make me happy. The whole point of this series is that this pink puffball represents kindness and friendship in the face of world-destroying evil and swallows it whole. And especially since this game came out in the year it did, I really needed that. I still haven't gotten around to trying Sonic Frontiers, but the soundtrack was incredible. I also really want to play through Splatoon 3's story mode at some point, and maybe give Rune Factory 5 a shot after I had so much fun with 4. But as you can tell by the fact I'm already listing games I haven't played, we're through the list of 2022 games I played on Switch. I know it wasn't a big list, but... Wait, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Hello? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. I know it came out, I was scared that if I talk about it, if I say how much I love it, that they'll think I'm a spineless, nostalgia-blind shill, you know? No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Okay, whatever, fine. I'll talk about it then, okay? Sorry about that. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are my favorite main generation Pokemon games since the DS days. No, I'm not kidding. Look, I know, believe me, I know, these games should not have been shipped in the shape they were. They're a testament to how capitalistic corporate rulings truly ruin good art. They're messy and sad, and I completely understand why people who buy them, despite all that, are seen as pathetic, or in denial, or nostalgia blind. Just looking at the footage of this game is enough to confirm it. It's utterly below the standard of AAA games, and of all Nintendo games, for that matter. But, all that being said, I think a certain blue puppet put it best. When I look at the game, I see those privileged few on top, who pushed the game out, called it a day, and high-fived each other all the way to the bank. But when I play the game, I see the folks downstairs who put in as much love and care into it as they possibly could. Arlo. I'm not one to just parrot YouTubers for my opinions, but when a monster's right, he's right. I'd struggled for months to put into words why I found myself so drawn to such a flawed product, but when I watched his review, there it was. The words I couldn't find, but knew to be true. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet may be visually abhorrent, janky, unfinished, sheep-looking testaments to greed, but they're also, strangely, just as great a testimony for the creative, adventurous, and meaningful sides of Game Freak. This story is so good, easily the best in series history. The characters are so well written, the jokes actually land consistently, not a lot of plot development feels forced or coincidental, and that finale is seriously one of the coolest sequences in any RPG I've ever played. And the new Dex is unbelievable. Banger after banger. Quaxley, Armarouge, Garganacl, Mousehold, Tinkaton, Clodsire, Annihilate, Orthworm, and that's not even talking about Paradox Pokemon or DLC. And the music is incredible too. Undertale's Toby Fox wrote a solid chunk of this, and that's all you really need to know that it's good. In Sword and Shield, The wild area was so small and limited that the vision for it didn't really come across to a lot of people, including myself. And so many people, including myself, judged Gen 8 on the merits of a more traditional Pokemon game, with the wild area stuff being more of a side venture. And as a traditional title, Pokemon Sword and Shield is utterly disappointing. But in Scarlet and Violet, that vision is finally brought to life. And I gotta say, it works, man. It works wonders, in fact. It's just so fun to explore this world, fill out your decks, collect items, and raise your team. It feels like a legitimate adventure again. The locations feel distinct, even if a little vacant, and the characters are a joy to meet and talk with. The difficulty, though the open nature of the game can lead to all sorts of out-of-whack issues, makes certain fights even more memorable if you play on the proper path. This was the first Pokemon game since the DS days that not only contained a story worth experiencing and an adventure worth setting off on, but also a whole lot to do and see after the fact that I actually engaged with. Kitakami is equally fun to explore, but admittedly, besides the main story, there isn't all that truly new here. But Blueberry Academy? That place was what truly sucked me back into Scarlet and Violet. This place has little missions you can complete, and you're able to upgrade it to further the number of Pokemon you can spot. Plus stuff you can do elsewhere in the Academy too, like the item printer, special dialogue with already existing characters, or the little stupid stuff like directly controlling your Pokemon for some reason. But the star here is indeed the finale to the DLC's story, and the fact that after that story, you unlock access to a bunch more catchable legendaries, just because. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet will hopefully go down as the series' lowest point. Hopefully they get their act together and make stuff that at minimum runs acceptably. But also, if this is Pokemon at their lowest, then I could not be more excited for their future. And both as a Kalos fan and a fan of Legends Arceus, ZA could be another personal all-timer. But the Pokemon Company is still the Pokemon Company, so you never know. It could be yet another disappointment. All I know for sure is, despite everything, I loved Generation 9, and I'm glad it was the game that helped me through a rough ending to 2022. In November, my nephew died. The rest of this year was most emotionally devastating 2 months I had ever experienced. It sucked, both feeling the pain myself and watching the people I love go through it all. After months of fighting, it ended so abruptly. All for naught. Nothing left but trauma and grief. You're never truly over grief, and it still hurts to think about every now and then. Which makes the fact that my gaming memories of 2022 are somehow relentlessly positive really weird to grapple with. I got 2 of my favorite Pokemon games ever this year, a Kirby game that felt like the Puffball was meeting its true potential, and more. Even stuff like the trailers for Splatoon, Xenoblade, Mario & Rabbids 2, I remember this stuff super fondly, despite the time period it all happened in. Maybe it's some weird coping mechanism, relating times in life with the fun things I'm passionate about, rather than the painful ones. And I do feel conflicted about it, like I'm almost disrespecting his legacy by not thinking of his battle first. But then, I remember the lesson I learned in 2022. And I begin to think that maybe he's perfectly fine with the way I go about it. Because the best way to honor the dead is to let go and live. That doesn't mean forgetting them, but by focusing on what gives you joy to ease the pain. I miss you, Ezra. (2023) Tears of Wonder. What is an anxious person to do when presented with all the different ways their life could fall apart? It's one thing to live in the post-nuclear weapon world, another to live in the information age, a time where several different apocalypses are presented to us as either possible or inevitable. AI superintelligence, climate change, nuclear war, disease, dystopia, damnation, and plenty more. Pick your poison. Regardless of what you think is coming, many seem to agree that at least one of them is, and coming very soon. It's hard not to live life with a constant nagging nihilism in the back of my brain because of it. Seeing everything that goes wrong on any given day in an instant has catastrophic effects on any brain, but especially mentally ill ones, and especially those who just went through a family death. What does anything I'm doing in the day-to-day matter when it could all end in a second? When at any point a robot with a little bit too much power could pave over our species like we humans do to trees? When a disaster could sweep away everything I have and cherish? When one of several politicians with the power to destroy our entire species could decide, what the hell? 2023 was the year I found out that there aren't really answers to those questions, at least not ones we have any real capacity to understand. It was the year I realized that, in a strange sense, having little control over these large looming powers is actually freeing. It was the year I focused on connection, being with others, and living life the best I could, not just to distract myself from the scary things, but to fight against them in whatever small way I could, by being a decent human. I won't delve deep here, but I will just say that I used to be the kind of annoying, vindictive, religious but unspiritual jerk that you likely know and hate. I slowly simmered on the stove of maturity after high school, but 2023 was when I officially had the epiphany that being a decent human doesn't have to do with what arbitrary rules you follow. It's about whether or not you put others before yourselves. And yeah, I know that sounds simplistic, but I'm young, A lot of this probably sounds trivial and faux profound, I get it. I'm just telling you how my adult journey went, okay? Speaking of journeys, though, let's talk about the biggest one I went on in 2023, and how it somehow managed to mirror the game that came out before it and its impact on me. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is my favorite Nintendo Switch game. Not just for being a sequel to an already impactful game that I loved, but for coming out at a time in my life where I needed it just as much as its predecessor 6 years later. And somehow, it rivaled that impact, and in some ways usurped it. If Breath of the Wild reignited my love of games, Tears of the Kingdom reignited my love of creativity in general, of life, honestly. There was something so thoroughly therapeutic about revisiting Hyrule all those years later. Me being in such an anxious and unsure time in my own mind, just as I was back then, seeing all the friends I made on that original journey come into their own, find who they are, and embrace their purpose. Seeing all the old sights and sounds that I did back then, just as tranquil as before, even after another calamity. And watching Zelda sacrifice her entire self, and playing as Link in an effort to reassemble it and save her. The mechanics of open-world Zelda also hit a crescendo here. Creative, open-ended design isn't just in the dungeons and shrines and bosses. It's now built right into the very fabric of the game. It's how you get around. It's what you build. It's how you fight. Breath of the Wild rewards creative play in a curiosity sense, but Tears takes a step further and rewards creativity in a boldness sense. The deeply personal journey is no longer just about where you went compared to another person, but how you got there, what tools or builds or abilities you utilized. There's a group of people out there who just cannot appreciate this style of game. From the discussions I've had, they don't see the journey as worth the destination. They don't see the appeal of making your own journey. To them, that's the game's job. And I get it. If games are books, Open World Zelda is a choose-your-own-adventure book the size of Pride and Prejudice. If you like literature for the expertly crafted stories and structures, that book is not appealing at all. But I think of it this way. Tears of the Kingdom isn't an art piece made by an artist for me to experience in any expected way. It's a piece of art where you get to participate in its craft. It's a canvas with some details already painted on that you then get to express yourself on top of. And as a curiosity-driven guy who has always loved to push the limits of games, worlds, and stories, that's so revolutionarily appealing, is it not? To me, it's no surprise at all that this new direction for Zelda has gone this well. And as for the debate about this game being better or worse than Breath of the Wild, I've never really understood why people like this game less. I understand being disappointed with the scope of the sky or depths, for sure, and definitely being disappointed with the story. But frankly, I just don't care. Tears has all the joy of Breath of the Wild in its bones, but with more creativity, more options, more abilities. To me, it completes Breath of the Wild's Hyrule. If Breath of the Wild reminded me of the beauty that lies in stopping and smelling the roses, then Tears showed me what unshakable power lies in the combination of creativity and courage, both for a game like this and for the world at large. And during a time where I was constantly anxious that the world around me was crumbling, that was honestly empowering and inspirational. If you look at what games I've spent the most time on Switch, you will first see Smash Ultimate. That's my comfort game. I play it online. You get it. But second place, 3 spots above Breath of the Wild, which came out when I had a lot more free time, by the way, is Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know how else to get across how much I adore this game. But 2023 had more than just Zelda. It was the main course for many Switch owners, yes, but a couple other Nintendo offerings this year easily could have been their own showstoppers, including one that was long awaited by its fan base. Pikmin 4 is just really good. It's one of those modern Nintendo entries that refines the series to a pristine shine, then expands upon it in every way it can. I got a good 5 hours in, and was still only on the third major area before other priorities popped up. But as someone who played through all of Pikmin 1 in preparation, I think it's undeniable that Pikmin 4 takes everything the original did right and streamlines it to a crisp, almost robotically perfect experience, to be honest. Not to mention, it's easily one of the best looking games on the console. Thanks, Unreal Engine. You know what else felt unreal, though? The Mario movie. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is a sloppy joe your mom made. It's so messy, and the actual meat of the story is questionable, but it is also clearly made with love for its source material and its fans. In other words, it's probably objectively slop, but someone you love made it. You grew up with the taste. It's hard not to love it. For every shoehorned licensed song that felt like it ruined the mood, there was something like 4 trillion references to Mario and Nintendo at large that you could spot and smile at. Yeah, it's unseasoned beef covered in barbecue sauce, but that's still good. It's just not all too engaging. But you know what was engaging? Fire Emblem Engage. As a Fire Emblem tourist who's only ever played Awakening, I found Three Houses' massive scope to be a turnoff. But Engage? It was bright, colorful, looked to be smaller in scope, more compact. I found myself really excited to give this series another shot with Engage. The verdict? Well, gameplay-wise, it's some of the best stuff out there. Everything's so smooth, the maps are well designed, and the gimmick involving summoning past Fire Emblem heroes made for some solid variety and unique strategies. But the major issues with this game are so major that they might just completely turn some folks off. The character design and story are really rough. These character designs are ultra anime, like gratingly so. I like a few characters for sure, but the grand majority are so over the top that it's comical. The star tattoo on the thief girl's cheek, the gigantic physics-defying dresses, the abundance of hair bows, exposed waists, cleavage. It's just a little bit much. And the voice acting and story do not help things either. It's the kind of game I'd be pretty embarrassed to play with the volume up in front of literally anybody. Against Awakening, I'd take that any day of the week, despite the overall smoother gameplay of Engage. I may have been turned off by Three Houses' focus on character relationships and massive story, but I have to imagine that just like Awakening, a focus on relationships probably does make for a much better motivator than trudging through a generic hero's journey. But, all that said, Engage does have a wonderful soundtrack. I'll give it that. You know what else was wonderful? Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Okay, I promise I'm done with that stupid transition pattern now. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is so delightful. The animation and art style are lovely. The new enemy and power-up varieties are really great, and the amount of depth the badge system adds is so welcome after years of 2D Mario feeling pretty flat. But the star of the show is the Wonder Flowers. They take this game from a silly but simple 2D platformer to a silly and magical one. It's exactly the injection of creative life the 2D series needed. It feels like a distinctly 3D Mario idea transcribed into the classic 2D formula. And some of these wonder gimmicks are so surprising and fun, and sometimes even funny, that the memories of this game will no doubt stick with me for a long time. I have a story to tell you. The day this game came out, I was having yet another severe bout with my anxious mind. So much so that I almost forgot this game even came out until I opened my Switch and saw it preloaded there. A game this colorful and bright and full of joy and whimsy was just the ticket, but it got even better, because when I opened that second level, picked up the Wonder Flower, and those damn plants started singing me a song. I cried, man. I cried. Moments like that are why games are so crucial and magical to me, and I'm sure to many others. They have this special quality that other entertainment doesn't, where they don't just distract you from the crumbling world you're in, they truly suck you into their own worlds and teach you things about yourself. I learned that night why Mario still meant so much to me, even after I'd grown up. He represents that very aspect of the medium to a T. I've heard it said that growing up is simply letting go of your childish things. I don't think that's it. It's learning what new place those childish things have in your adult life and maintaining that place. For instance, I don't think liking games makes you childish. I think arguing about them and judging other people based on them does. And between wonder and tears both affecting me in massive ways in 2023, I learned that this new place doesn't have to be a lockbox where I merely look at them as nostalgic memories. They can give me new, distinct, and powerful experiences even now. And it's okay and even helpful to let them be that impactful. I still have a lot of trouble with anxiety. I think you can imagine many of the things that I worry about and maybe even relate to the constant creeping dread I feel. But when I remember 2023 and the games that released that year and how they affected me, it reminds me that maybe, just maybe, everything really will turn out okay. "2024, taking a beat." Well, folks, this is it. The final full year of Nintendo's Switch. And much like the previous final full year of a Nintendo console, I didn't really play any Nintendo games, admittedly. Don't take that to mean I just stopped gaming. I never did, but pretty much all of Nintendo's first-party offerings this year were just not all that appealing to me. Besides one. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is just fun, man. It's certainly not as adventurous or puzzly as I would have liked, and I have a lot more issues with it the more I think about it after the fact. But none of them stop it from being fun. It's probably on the lower end of my personal Zelda ranking, but it's still a Zelda game, and I love Zelda. That said, I have so little to say about it, and about any other first-party Nintendo game this year, that I figured I would instead just take 2024 to do exactly what Nintendo did. Just take a breather. 2024 was a down year for me, but not because any major horrible things happened. It was just very busy and stressful, and I was dealing with that anxiety I've been alluding to this whole time, among other things. But in a weird way, it actually made me perfectly happy with this lighter-hitting schedule the year offered. I don't think I was in a state where I could have appreciated a bigger game, especially so soon after Tears did a number on me. So yeah, let's follow in Nintendo's footsteps and take it easy, as I look back on all the years, one last brief time, and see what my personal Game of the Year picks each year are, and why. (2017). If I'm being honest, if you asked a 16-year-old me at the end of 2017 which game he liked best, he would have said Breath of the Wild. But with the benefit of hindsight, and with a sequel to that game having come out which makes the original feel a little obsolete, now it's without a doubt Super Mario Odyssey. Breath of the Wild was and will forever be the video game that has impacted me the most in my life. But as you saw earlier, if we're talking games now, ones that I would hypothetically revisit, Odyssey comes to mind first. 2018. This one was way easier. It's Smash, and it always has been, and it always will be. This is my most played video game ever at this point, and I don't regret it one bit. It brings me so much joy, even just conceptually. Like, I'll be playing a random match and think, man, Link is fighting Minecraft Steve in Midgar from Final Fantasy VII. This game is awesome. And it is. It's magical even after thousands of hours and 8 years. It has gotten all the awards and praises a video game could reasonably get, and I still feel like it's underappreciated. It's an achievement and a half. 2019, Dragon Quest XI. Luigi's Mansion is fantastic, but it just had the unfortunate fate of coming up against a game that sucked me in like no other RPG has since Chrono Trigger. Even through a massive campaign, tons of menus and items and skill trees that would normally scare me away from a game, and a pretty mild soundtrack, I was hooked, just on the story. I always felt motivated to go further and see what would happen next. And in the final stretch of that story, I was addicted for a solid month. It was the first game of my adult life that I imagined playing while stuck doing other daily stuff. I was that obsessed. 2020. I guess it's Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, but that's kind of just because I don't have a better answer. If I didn't limit the games to stuff I myself had played, then I'd easily give it to Animal Crossing, just for being the ray of light it was during that dark time. The game probably saved a lot of lives, like legitimately saved lives, but since I'm keeping it to stuff I played, and I would be pretty embarrassed to give it to Clubhouse Games, Age of Calamity it is. Again, this game's not all that bad, just an infuriating waste of potential. 2021. My goatee was Bowser's Fury for the longest time, but then I finally got around to finishing Metroid Dread. To call this game a near-perfect ideal of Metroid isn't an understatement at all. It's so good, man. From the atmosphere, to the movement, to the nearly horror-level tension, to the new abilities. It's all just perfect. And the game itself is slick and fun as hell to master. I don't want to let recency bias talk too much here, but I wouldn't be shocked if it sticks with me for a long time and becomes a Nintendo all-timer. 2022. Let me tell you something. You know, kids will pick up sticks and pretend they're lightsabers or magic wands. That wasn't me. I picked up rocks and snowballs and pretended to capture my pets. So when I say that Pokemon Legends Arceus was a dream come true for me, I am not at all exaggerating. But it's more than just the tactile Pokeball throwing. It's the fact that Pokemon have wild behaviors, that there's a sense of real danger for the first time in the entire series. It makes the Pokemon world feel like it has actual consequences. It's not an imitation of our world with powerful creatures inserted in. It's now a world that has reconciled with those powerful creatures in a meaningful and realistic way, and that is so unreal as a lifelong Pokemon fan. 2023. Come on, man, it's Tears of the Kingdom, one of the most impactful games of my entire life, only rivaled by its predecessor. It made me love life again and inspired me to be truly bold in my creative endeavors. It's the reason why you're listening to this right now. 2024. Like I said, I didn't play many Nintendo games this year, and even if I did, I can't imagine Mario & Luigi Brothership or Mario Party Jamboree would have stood a chance against one of the most engrossing games I've ever played, which is somehow one where you spend the entire game navigating menus. It's Balatro. Balatro is unlike anything I've ever played. I know at the core of it is poker, which is something I've played, and roguelike deck builder, but the thing about it that truly feels different is just how unbound it feels from the shackles of your typical build-based run games. There are, of course, paths you can travel that synergize in simple ways and keep things straightforward. You can spend your entire life playing checker deck and playing for flushes, and you'd still have a blast. But where I got truly engrossed was in the deeper things. The way certain jokers interact with this or that card. The factories you can build that give you planet level ups by the hundreds. It doesn't just feel like a roguelike, it feels like a sandbox. All while basing itself in an easy to understand game. And sporting a super cool style and a killer theme that slightly changes as you play different phases of the game. And the craziest part is, I completely bounced off this game at first. It was only upon a second try that I saw the matrix, so to speak. Now I've got nearly 150 hours in this game. And then finally, just for a little ending stinger here to cap things off, I give you my top 10 favorite games I played on Switch for the first time. Or my TTFGPFTTONS for short. I've talked enough, and there will be plenty of GOTY repeats of course, so I'll just let the list fly and leave you with that. Number 10. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Number 9, Balatro. Number 8, Luigi's Mansion 3. Number 7, Metroid Dread. Number 6, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Number 5, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Number 4, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Number 3, Super Mario Odyssey. Number 2, Dragon Quest XI. And number 1, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. And with that, I've made it through everything I have to say about the Nintendo Switch. Well, almost everything. I've yet to say goodbye. At the time of writing this, the Switch 2 has been the subject of many, many controversies. People are still freaking out over the prices, game keycards, patents, and plenty more. The discussion around Metroid Prime 4 has been exhausting. People are dissatisfied with Mario Kart World after a few baffling updates, and don't even get me started on Pokemon Legends ZA. Yeah, all sorts of stuff Nintendo's done has been in the news. It's not the most popular thing at the moment to appreciate Nintendo. In the general internet eye, they've become washed, for lack of better phrasing. And while I disagree with that general sentiment, a lot of their actions have indeed been indefensible. All this, and on a global scale, uncertainty is filling the air in more than a few ways. But whether Nintendo nosedives in their arrogance, is forced into the shitter due to economic issues, or manages to keep the ball rolling a decent amount, this I know. The Nintendo Switch 1 was their magnum opus. It hit at the perfect time, and its impact will be so long-lasting. It brought us so many insane experiences we never thought possible, especially in those dry Wii U years. It simply has the best library in gaming history, full stop. Its gimmick brought inherent value to every port, every player, in the most Nintendo way imaginable. If I'm being honest, ever since the Switch 2 was announced, I felt this creeping horror. Not for the sake of Nintendo, but for my own mental security. The Nintendo Switch, as the years went on, was such a wonderful and much-needed source of stability. No matter where life took me, I could rest easy knowing games were in the pipeline and millions of people would be there to play them. The concept of that community-wide reliability sort of became a security blanket for me. One that is now fading into the annals of video game history, thanks to its replacement starting off with a controversial bang. Discussing this company has become a minefield. I can no longer express my opinions on games without people coming in to push their own agendas. The universe has corrected itself, back to the eras where liking Nintendo made you the uncool kind of gamer. I'm not an oracle. I can't predict what's next for Nintendo, for us as humanity, or for the planet in general. Times are hard and scary, and while Nintendo probably really wants to be, I can't say after everything that's happened that they'll be able to be that stable presence in the room a second time. Which leaves me, now, overwhelmed with appreciation for what the Switch accomplished. I took it all so for granted, too. Video games matter a lot to me, if you can't tell. You could say a lot of my interests are very special to me. In fact, pretty much as soon as I was handed a Game Boy SP with Pokemon Blue in it, as a small child, my fate was sealed. But I forget sometimes that love for something does have to be fostered. And the evidence for that is found in the years leading up to the Switch. I lost my passion for video games. It's hard to believe that, but it actually happened. And now that the Switch is done, and I look back at it all, it almost feels like it picked me up right when I had fallen and nursed my passion back to health. And now, I can honestly say, even if the worst happens, thanks to the Nintendo Switch, I will never stop loving video games. And while it might sound cheesy, it's that love of video games, persisting through being bullied in high school, a worldwide pandemic which robbed me of what little childhood I had left, a change-filled year full of family frustrations, a heart-wrenching family death, panic attacks, all sorts of scary world events, mental battles, and much, much more. That love of video games has been an anchor for me, and I cannot imagine not having such an anchor and fighting the battles I have. You could even say that the Switch, through reviving my passion for this medium, saved my life. And for that, I'm forever grateful. I'm gonna miss you, Switch. Thank you for everything. Epilogue. The game is fun. The game is a battle. If it's not fun, why bother? If it's not a battle, where's the fun? It's a test that you pass or a quest that you fail. A race against time. Fun and battle always locked together. But the game is also something else. It's a journey. A passport to new worlds, maybe even an Odyssey. A look, a feel, an exploration. Close your focus and open your mind. Yes, the journey requires the right ticket, and that ticket is Nintendo Switch. But in the end, it's not just where you can take your game. It's where your game can take you. So let's go. Reggie Fils-Aimé, E3 2017. Even if things get wild from here, and the odyssey of life feels like it may end with you, we can always make the best of our chains to reach new horizons. The chronicles of our lives are always being written. Even in the face of dread, life can be a party. If you're anything like me, sometimes you can feel forgotten, hoping someone sees you struggling and helps you engage with life again. Helps you see the wonder life has to offer. But please, stop, take a breath, and shed no tears. Because even in life's hardest times, we can take solace in knowing we're all superstars. We're the ones who made it this far. So let's get ready and flip the switch together.
This strange world, it's so fast and deep. All these things, wild and new to see. On my own, far from home, I was scared alone. When your beat showed the way to me, we're breaking through, down to the core. No stopping us, not anymore. Inside the storm, I found the key. Your beat rang out, my voice has been released. Hear it call, it's whispering truth. This melody in harmony will strike a chord that's gonna break us free.
Nintendo Switch, the console that saved my life, was written, recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, known as YU Online. I don't have social media because screw that. If you're curious about music used, there's a complete list along with timestamps in the description. I'd like to give a special thanks to some of the amazing online creators who inspired me to make something of my own. So, in alphabetical order, thanks to Arlo, Carlito, Coney, King K, Kit and Krista of the Kit and Krista podcast, Kyle Bosvin and his show Delayed Input, Liam Triforce, Scott Kramer, Scott the Waz, The Geek Critique, and Yo Schiller. Go watch all of them. They're very good at what they do. Much better than me. If you liked it, you know what to do. I've never made anything like this before, and I don't have the tools I used to make stuff with, but I tried my best. Stay safe, enjoy your games, and Happy New Year.